Hey you guys, welcome back to the salon. Today we're going to be talking about a 1960s movie that, for whatever reason, I don't really hear that many people talking about, even though it's kind of brilliant. So let's get into it. So I'm actually ashamed to say that I had never heard of this movie until fairly recently. A friend of mine on Facebook actually recommended it to me, and I had never heard of it previously, so, just whatever, 40 lashes with a wet noodle or whatever it was that Dear Abby or whoever used to say. So this is a phenomenal, like British film, and it's called Séance on a Wet Afternoon. And it's kind of this whole, it's really just like a marvel of atmospheric mood and like this really incredible like psychological depth. Now, I don't know if I'd call it a horror movie per se, but it is like a very intensely disturbing, very absorbing thriller. I guess I'd call it a psychological thriller that just got so many accolades when it came out back in 1964. Actually including a Best Actress Oscar nomination for the lead actress, Kim Stanley. Now, she ended up losing to Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins, which, I gotta say that's kind of a shame, although not all that surprising. Nothing against Julie Andrews. I really like her, and I actually really like Mary Poppins, but I kind of feel like the Julie Andrews role in that is much more like a kind of crowd-pleasing kind of role, and I guess that's, maybe why she got it. But I definitely think that Kim Stanley got robbed in this case. But, it's not the first or the last time that would happen at the Oscars, so, it's not really that not big of a thing. Kim Stanley's portrayal in this movie of essentially like a mentally unstable spirit medium was just so nuanced and so eerie that I really kind of I was just completely enthralled by her character. She kind of comes across as like really, really sweet and harmless on the surface, but then there's like this real manipulative, like dark insanity like lurking underneath, and I think she portrayed that really well. So the plot of Séance on a Wet Afternoon basically details a, not gonna lie, completely batshit scheme that the working class medium named Myra Savage concocts to get attention and notoriety for her supposed psychic abilities. Now, the movie doesn't take a stand either way, so it's kind of like ambiguous about whether her abilities are real or not, but she clearly believes that they're real, and she also believes that her stillborn son, Arthur, is acting at her as her spirit guide. So she has these weekly seances that she holds in her house, and she contacts Arthur, and that's kind of how she gets her information from the beyond or whatever. So I've mentioned before, probably a million times, about how much I love this kind of ambiguity in films, because like I said, the film just really doesn't take a stand either way. It's like, yes, she's really psychic, no, she's delusional, whatever, but it doesn't really matter because it's kind of not so much about her being psychic, it's about her psychological, it's just like I said, like a psychological kind of thriller, psychological drama about like this sociopathy that she has. It's the ambiguity is like just especially good in this movie, because while we as the audience become unshakably certain over the course of the movie that Myra is quite insane, we're never really sure if her mediumship is maybe the cause or the effect of her insanity. So I like that they kind of like set it up that way. So she basically uses her very cowed, sort of milquetoast husband, whose name is Billy, who's actually played by Richard Attenborough. And he's kind of like her lackey. He's the one that does all her dirty work. So what Myra decides to do, this fucking scheme that she's come up with, she kidnaps, although she calls it borrowing, she borrows the daughter of a really wealthy, very connected, like socially connected couple, and ransoms the kid for £25,000. Now, initially, at the start of the plan, Myra and Billy they aren't planning to hurt the kid, or they're not actually even initially planning to keep the ransom money. Their intentions for this plan, that's why I said this is batshit, are a lot more convoluted and a lot more insidious than that. And it's implied, they don't really state this outright, but it is implied that they've been refining the details for years, that maybe I don't think they've kidnapped anyone prior, but I think they've done like some dry runs and they've come up with like new things, and like they've been planning this for a long time. It seems like the way they talk to each other. So in a nutshell, what they're planning to do is they're going to keep the kid and the ransom money hidden someplace. until Myra has made contact with the kid's parents and the police. And at that point, she's going to go to the police and say, oh, I've got messages from beyond, and they told me where the kid and the money is hidden. And everyone's going to be like, woo, she really is psychic. So she really thinks it's almost kind of like she's doing it as like a fucking, like a stunt in order to advertise her psychic abilities. That's essentially what she's doing. Like I said, she's crazy. You know what I mean? So this is the plan that she comes up with. Like I said, not going to keep the money, not going to keep the kid, not going to hurt the kid, just going to hide the kid and hide the money, and then say, hey, I'm psychic, I found it. And then everybody be like, oh my God, you're amazing. And then it'll be all over the news and she'll get famous and more people will come and she'll make her shitload ton of money that way. Now, as should be obvious from the type of movie that this is, the plan ultimately doesn't go the way it was supposed to. I mean, what fun would it be if it did? And as the movie goes on, the plan starts slowly sprouting ever more disturbing tendrils, I guess, as Myra's fragile hold on sanity begins crumbling away over the course of the story. Because the movie, and I think this was actually a brilliant decision, because the movie doesn't make clear from the beginning what exactly the specifics of Myra's plan are. Like, you know, like the outer, you know, the kind of like, yeah, we're going to kidnap the kid and hide the money and all that, like I just said, but they don't tell you like any of the intricate little details, like where's the drop going to be? How are we going to contact the police? Like all the little details, you don't know any of that. And I think that's a good idea because you don't know all of those details, it doesn't really like, so when she starts maybe altering the program, like as the story goes on, you're not entirely sure, you know, was that the way it was supposed to go, or is she just like making shit up as she's going along, or is she changing shit because she's losing her marbles or what? So I really like that. Like it engenders like a lot of suspense, and as the movie goes on, it gets like more and more gripping because you're like, holy shit, like you have no idea like how the shit's gonna end up. You know, it's not gonna be good, but you don't know like in what way that's gonna manifest itself, because you don't know as it goes on and she starts changing shit around. Like you start to maybe not know what her end game is now, and you don't know like how everything is gonna go wrong. Like, you know it's going to, but you don't know how. So it's like, it's really, really good and suspenseful. Now, the creepiest thing about this movie, I think, is kind of like the interplay between Myra and her husband Billy, and this sort of maybe unspoken dynamic between them that, and we're not sure how long this has been going on, but you're presuming that Billy is a decent person, but maybe just very weak-willed. But it's this whole dynamic between them that kind of makes him go along with his wife's very obviously delusional ideas without really complaining about it too much. Myra doesn't really browbeat Billy into doing her will. She doesn't threaten him. Their relationship, it seems, is such that she doesn't really need to. She's basically able to convince him through essentially like the sheer force of her very seemingly reasonable wheedling and her kind of like slow escalation of requests that I guess they kind of leave Billy in the same situation as that, you know, fabled frog in boiling water, where it's just kind of like, oh, like the first few requests are kind of reasonable, but then they get crazier and crazier, and by then you're in like too deep and you can't really do much to extricate yourself. He obviously loves her dearly and they've been together a long time, but because of this, he's almost kind of like come to a thing where he's just grudgingly accepted. I don't even know if it's grudgingly. Maybe he's just kind of like this kind of dude, but he's just accepted that she doesn't see him as anything other than a tool to facilitate her own wants and desires. Like she just wants him to do what he's just kind of like, yes, dear. You know what I mean? So who knows what happened in the past that's like kind of made him like lose his will like that, but she's obviously like manipulating it big time. So I feel like in this way, Billy is a really tragic character. I mean, he's kind of like subsumed a lot of his own identity and his moral compass, like as the story goes on, in deference to hers. At one point, and I think this is one of the best exchanges in the film, actually, at one point, Myra tells him that kidnapping or borrowing the kid, because like I said, she's pretty delusional, so she has to come up with something. We're not like kidnapping her, we're borrowing her. We're going to give her back and she's not going to get hurt. Everything's going to be fine. No one's going to get hurt. She says, you know, we're not going to hurt the kid. We're just borrowing her. We're not even going to keep the money. So what harm is there? And she says to him at one point, she says, "You agree with the end, don't you?" As in the end where she gets like really famous for finding this kid and finding the money. So she asked him that, and she has this very, very soft, sweet voice. She isn't mad. She's not yelling or anything like that. And he's like, "Yeah, I agree with that." And she says, "Well, then you must agree with the means." So using that kind of like logic, he's like, "Oh yeah, I suppose so." You know what I mean? I don't know if I'd say that he's not all that bright. I just think that he's kind of like weak-willed, like I said. And because he loves her and because they've been together for so long, and I'm assuming that her personality is like so much more overriding than his, that he's just gotten used to going along with whatever scheme like she goes along with. She's like easily able to talk him into things. The great thing about these particular interactions is that you as the viewer, like when you're watching it, you can really kind of like feel the weight of the years of their marriage like behind them, and how her probably long-term manipulation of Billy and his, rather passive acceptance of it at this point are kind of like par for the course, at this stage of their relationship. And it's really only at the very end of the movie when Myra ends up like taking things, one step too far, like that he decides he's gonna drop his nuts and, make a stand, and essentially is like, yeah, this is too much. And he actually does end up blowing the whistle on her. But by the time that happens, she's really kind of like lost her marbles to such an extent that she's not really able to protest anymore or try to wiggle her way out of it. The scenes, too, with Myra interacting with the borrowed child, the kidnapped child, are also really, really unsettling. And again, like one of my favorite things about this movie, it's very clear from these interactions that she has with this kid that Myra views the little girl in the same way that she views Billy, just like as a thing that will get her the results she wants. She's not cruel to the kid. She doesn't like beat her or yell at her or anything like that. But she's very, very, very chillingly indifferent and very like detached, like both when she speaks to her and when she speaks about her, like to Billy. She's just talking about her like she's an object, like she's just a thing that has to be like maneuvered around like to get her what she wants. And to me, that's like creepier than if she'd been like mean to her or anything like that, because it's like you can tell that this is like not a person to her. It's just like an object, even though it's like a terrified little girl who's been kidnapped, and it's really, really scary. I mean, that's kind of like one of the great strengths of Kim Stanley's performance here, is that you kind of like get drawn in by her very demure, very kind of like motherly exterior, I guess. And then as the movie goes on, you slowly start to realize that she is a sociopathic monster. I mean, she's a monster. And it's really like one of the best films that I've seen at conveying like the banality of evil, just like this person that seems super sweet and super, and like I said, they're not yelling, they're not angry or nothing like that, but the way that they manipulate other people into doing their bidding, and you can tell that they actually don't see other people as people at all, and they're just kind of like using everybody for their own ends, and it's really, really terrifying. It's really terrifying. Again, like aside from just the stellar characterization work, like all the psychological depth in this movie, and all of the suspense, because like I said, this plan, and it just keeps developing all these other little byways and changes, and you're not really sure where it's going to go, or if this was the original plan and now we're changing it, or we don't even know. And it's like really, it's great. The film also looks gorgeous, black and white, and it just has so many of these beautiful like atmospheric shots of just like candlelit faces around the seance table. You guys know how much I love movies with seances in them, or just like spooky houses reflected in puddles of rainwater. It's just like a gorgeous, gorgeous looking movie. Now, as I mentioned before, it's not strictly a horror film, although I mean, I've seen movies that were like this, that were still categorized as horror films. I think it's still categorized as like maybe a thriller or a psychological thriller. But I don't think I would quibble if somebody wanted to call it a psychological horror film, because I mean, if from that point of view, like watching somebody that's a complete sociopath, like, and the way they manipulate somebody, and like, and there is like danger and shit like that involved. So, I don't think it's that crazy to say that this is absolutely horror adjacent. The look of it, the subject matter, I mean, it definitely puts it in the same league as a lot of the great ghost stories and the great thrillers of the period. And like I said, I kind of feel like even when people bring up like a lot of brilliant movies from the 60s, I feel like this one doesn't really get talked about all that much, and that's really a shame because it's really, really awesome. If you're really into 60s movies, if you're really into thrillers or like psychological horror or anything, or even kind of like ghost stories, this isn't really a ghost story, but it kind of has some of the trappings of it, like the seance kind of imagery and that kind of stuff. And like I said, they leave it ambiguous as to whether she really has psychic powers or not, so you could read it either way. But if you're into anything like that and you haven't seen it, you should absolutely see this. It's really, really good. It's just really a shame that it's not better known or it's not talked about more, especially since it was nominated for Oscars and things like that. But hopefully this little video will go like a teeny little 0.001% toward like maybe getting more people to watch it, which would absolutely make me happy. So yeah, go find it on some streaming service and watch it. It's really, really good. You'll be glad you did. And that will do it for this visit to the salon, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.